Every morning started the same way. Alarm at 6, coffee brewing, me bracing for whatever new crisis would somehow be my fault before I even finished my first cup. Tuesdays were the worst. That was performance review day. Sophie would sit at the kitchen table with her arms crossed like a prosecutor and list my failures. "You didn't take out the trash Monday night," she'd say, like she was reporting a felony. I'd sip coffee and remind myself that arguing only creates fresh material for next week's meeting. Never mind I worked a 10-hour shift Monday and came home to find her binge-watching. Never mind I'd taken the trash out every other week for 3 years. One missed bag, and suddenly I'm the villain in her personal drama. Here's the thing about living with someone who is never wrong. You stop fighting, not because you're weak, but because you realize energy is a limited resource. "You're right," I'd say, grabbing my work bag. "I'll remember next time." She'd smile like she just fixed the economy. I wasn't conceding. I was choosing peace over a pointless debate. When the dishwasher broke, it was because I loaded it wrong. When her car had a flat, it was because I didn't remind her to check the pressure. When her sister called her dramatic, that was my negative influence. After a while, the soundtrack moved into my head. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I wasn't trying hard enough. Last week I was stuck in traffic, staring at a steering wheel that suddenly looked exhausted and realized I was dreading going home. Not because of the home, because of the person in it. That night I walked in and found Sophie on the couch, scrolling. She didn't look up. "We need to talk," she said, in the tone that makes every husband wish for a sinkhole. "Okay," I said. "Talk. I can't keep living like this. Every day feels heavy, Jack. Your mood, your silence, it's too much." "My silence?" I said. "You talk enough for both of us." Her eyes narrowed. "That's sarcasm. You never take anything seriously. I feel like I'm suffocating in my own house. Sorry for breathing." "Exactly." She stood and started pacing. "You turn everything into a joke. I bring up my feelings, and you treat it like open mic night. Half my day at work is people yelling at me," I said. "When I come home, I'm not signing up for overtime." "I'm not yelling." She inhaled, smoothed her hair, and returned to calm wife mode. "Maya and the girls are going to Ibiza next week. I'm going with them. Ibiza," I repeated. "The quiet, meditative island known for sleeping at 9 p.m.? It's not about parties. It's about resetting, healing. I need space." "Space," I said, rolling the word around like a marble. "Yes. And honestly, Jack, if you don't take this week to seriously think about what you're bringing to this marriage, I don't know if I can keep doing this." There it was. The ultimatum with a therapist bow on top. "So I get homework," I said. "This isn't a joke. If something doesn't change, I don't see a future for us." I nodded slowly. "Got it." I'll think she exhaled, relieved, like she'd just submitted a difficult work email. "Good. Then maybe we still have a chance." I didn't answer. Something clicked inside me, quiet, small, and final. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't panicking about how to make her happy. I was thinking about what would make me happy. She went back to her phone, already searching flights and healing beach playlists. I went to the kitchen and rinsed my cup. The faucet hissed, the room hummed, and the house sounded like a place that might one day belong to me again. Sunday morning, Sophie was already dressed like she was heading to save the planet. Perfect hair, oversized suitcase, sunglasses that cost more than my monthly car payment. She stood by the door and gave me that look. The one that says, "You're lucky I still care enough to lecture you." "Remember what I said," she told me while adjusting her sunglasses. "Use this time to really think about your mistakes." "I expect some real accountability when I get back." I kissed her cheek, because that's what a supportive husband does, and said, "Safe travels. I'll definitely be thinking about my mistakes." She smiled, satisfied, like a teacher who just assigned summer homework. Then she rolled her suitcase out the door and a rideshare swallowed her whole. The silence hit me before I even made it back to the front door. Not the tense kind of silence I'd grown used to, the one that meant I'd said the wrong thing and now had to guess which wrong thing it was. This was a different silence, the kind where no one was about to sigh loudly from another room just to let me know I'd forgotten something. I stood in the doorway for a full minute, keys still in my hand. It felt like my house just got bigger. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. Flight delayed an hour. Already stressed. This is exactly the kind of thing that wouldn't happen if I wasn't so anxious from everything at home. I stared at the screen for a full 60 seconds, waiting for guilt to show up like it always did. Nothing. No scramble to fix it. No desperate attempt to calm her down. I just put the phone down, made myself a sandwich, with white bread and cheap mayo, the kind she hated, and left the crumbs on the counter. It felt revolutionary. 3 hours later, another text, boarding now. Remember what we talked about. This week needs to be productive for both of us. Productive. Like my marriage was a quarterly performance review. I typed back, have a great time. Enjoy the sun. What I didn't type, thanks for giving me the space to remember who I actually am. By the time Sunday night rolled around, I'd already done 3 things that would have earned me a full lecture if Sophie were home. I watched sports on full volume, left my shoes in the living room, and ate dinner straight out of the pan. The house didn't collapse. No one died. Monday morning, I woke up at 7 instead of 6. No rush to make coffee before she could complain about the noise. I turned on ESPN and watched the highlights in peace, feet up on the couch I normally sat on like a guest in a hotel lobby. At 11 a.m., my phone buzzed again. A group photo from Ibiza, Sophie, Maya, and 2 other women with cocktails, all smiles. First drink of freedom, the caption said. Freedom. From what exactly? From the man who worked 50-hour weeks to pay for half of this trip? From the guy who had never once told her she couldn't go anywhere or do anything? I laughed out loud, actual laughter, the kind that feels like it's been locked up for years. For lunch, I made a second sandwich, this time leaving the plate in the sink. Then I sat down and really looked at the house. Her house, really. Every throw pillow, every coffee table book, every candle no one was allowed to light. Tuesday morning, I woke up without an alarm for the first time in months. No, you should get up from the hallway. No subtle sighs to remind me I was already behind schedule. The sunlight hit the curtains, and I just stayed there. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, feeling strangely calm. Normally, by this time, Sophie would be halfway through a list of things I'd forgotten to do. Did you pay the electric bill? Did you check the mail? Did you text my mom back? Today there was only silence. At 7:30 I finally got up, made coffee, and didn't worry about whether I was making too much noise. I let the machine gurgle and hiss and fill the kitchen with the smell of regular non-organic coffee beans. The cheap ones she hated because they tasted burnt. I sat at the table in my boxers, scrolling through sports highlights on my phone, taking up the whole table instead of sitting on the edge like a guest. By 9, I decided to take the day off work. No fake excuse, no lie about food poisoning. I just texted my boss, taking a mental health day. Sophie would have hated that. She thought mental health days were just an excuse for lazy people. That alone made it more satisfying. I showered, dressed in my favorite old jeans, the ones with the rip on the knee Sophie swore made me look like a college dropout, and drove downtown to the diner she hated. The bell over the door jingled when I walked in, and for a moment I just stood there breathing in the smell of bacon and coffee. Sophie always complained it smelled like fried regret. To me, it smelled like freedom. Coffee? The waitress asked, smiling. Black. And keep it coming, I said, sliding into a booth by the window. The menu was laminated and slightly sticky, exactly as it should be. I ordered the breakfast special, extra bacon, hash browns, and a side of pancakes. Sophie would have had a stroke just reading that order. Halfway through my second cup of coffee, I pulled a pen out of my pocket and started writing on the back of a napkin. Not a list of chores, not a list of ways I had failed to communicate, just facts. Fact 1, I hadn't chosen anything in our house in 3 years. Not the couch, not the paint color, not even the stupid throw pillows we weren't allowed to use because they lost their shape. Fact 2, I couldn't remember the last time she asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer. But I knew everything about her office drama, her yoga instructor's personal life, and which one of her co-workers bought the wrong kind of almond milk. Fact 3, every vacation we'd taken was something Sophie wanted to do. Every restaurant was a place Sophie picked. Every weekend was built around her plans. When had I stopped having preferences? When had I turned into just the guy who made her choices possible? I sat back, staring at the napkin like it was a crime scene photo. This wasn't a rough patch. This wasn't us growing apart. This was the marriage Sophie wanted. Her as the lead actress, me as the supporting character who better not forget his lines. My phone buzzed halfway through the pancakes. Another update from Ibiza. This time, it wasn't just Sophie with the girls at the beach bar. It was a boomerang video. Sophie throwing her head back laughing, glass of sangria in hand, a crowd cheering behind them. Someone had written "Freedom Week" in bold white letters across the screen. I watched it twice, then a third time. Not because I was hurt, I wasn't, but because it felt like I was watching an ad for a life I wasn't invited to. Freedom Week. The guy who pays half the mortgage and fixes the sink doesn't count as freedom, apparently. The man who never told her she couldn't go anywhere or do anything? Definitely the oppressor holding her back. I put the phone down and shook my head, smiling. Not the bitter, tight-lipped smile I usually gave Sophie to keep the peace. A real smile. Because if she thought this was freedom, she was about to find out what it really looks like. A few minutes later, another buzz. This time it wasn't just the girls. A guy I didn't recognize, arm around Sophie's shoulders, both of them laughing. Caption, making new friends. So nice to be around positive energy for once. Positive energy. I stared at the screen for a full minute, then put it face down on the table. Not because it hurt, but because it was absurd. I wasn't even jealous. If some random dude wanted to spend his vacation validating Sophie's every thought, he was welcome to it. What got me was the caption. Positive energy for once, like living with me was some kind of curse. I paid the bill, tipped generously. Sophie always said I overtip, but the waitress smiled like I'd just made her day. That was worth every dollar. On the drive home, I rolled the windows down and blasted the classic rock station Sophie hated. The kind she said was music for dads who gave up on their dreams. Perfect soundtrack for the guy who was about to take high living room. I cranked the TV volume up and watched an action movie Sophie hated. No one rolled their eyes at the plot. No one made passive-aggressive comments about the mess. No one suggested we should be having meaningful conversations instead of staring at screens. Just me, my pizza, and the sound of explosions rattling the windows. I leaned back on the couch, full and comfortable, and realized something that should have been obvious months ago. I didn't want to fix this marriage. I didn't want therapy. I didn't want to spend another year apologizing for existing. I wanted out. Not because I was angry, anger fades. Not because I wanted revenge. That would make me like her. I wanted out because I finally remembered what it felt like to breathe, and I wasn't giving that up. Wednesday morning felt different, and not just because I had slept in again. There was no sense of urgency, no mental checklist running in my head before I even got out of bed. I lay there for a few minutes staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the fridge downstairs, realizing it was the only sound in the entire house. I got up, padded to the kitchen barefoot, and made coffee without rushing. I even whistled while the machine hissed and sputtered, something I hadn't done in years, because whistling was distracting to Sophie when she was on her morning calls. The coffee tasted better than usual. Or maybe I just tasted it properly for once, instead of gulping it down like fuel before rushing to fix whatever emotional mess awaited. I poured a second cup, sat at the table with my phone, and scrolled through messages. Nothing urgent. Sophie had posted another story from Ibiza, sunrise over the beach, her silhouette in yoga pants, captioned, "New day, new energy." I set the phone down and stared at the table for a while. Was this supposed to make me jealous, guilty, inspired? Whatever reaction she was fishing for, she didn't get it. By late morning, I had made my decision. This wasn't just about surviving until Sophie came back and then going back to normal. There was no normal. Not anymore. I Googled divorce attorneys. The first 3 websites looked too slick, too focused on aggressive representation. I didn't want aggressive. I wanted clean. Final. I found Morrison and Grant, clicked on the site, and liked what I saw. Professional. No flashy promises about winning custody battles. I dialed before I could lose my nerve. "Morrison and Grant, how can I help you?" "I need to talk to someone about divorce," I said, my own voice sounding calmer than I expected. They gave me a same-day appointment. I showered, shaved, and actually took my time getting dressed. Not to impress anyone, but because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't getting ready for someone else's approval. The law office was everything you'd expect. Muted colors, quiet, faint smell of coffee. The receptionist smiled professionally and led me to a conference room where a woman sat reviewing a folder. Evelyn Grant. She looked up as I walked in and extended a hand. "Mr. Harper?" "Jack," I said, shaking her hand. "Have a seat." She clicked her pen, her face neutral but not cold. "How long have you been married?" 3 years next month." "Children?" "No." "Shared assets?" I listed everything. The house, the cars, joint accounts, and yes, Sophie's student loans that had magically become our debt after the wedding. Evelyn made notes without judgment. "Any documented history of abuse, infidelity, or abandonment?" "No," I said, then paused. "Unless emotional manipulation counts." That made her look up. She didn't smile, but her eyes softened for a fraction of a second. "It doesn't count legally," she said, "but it does matter, mostly in how you handle yourself through this process." I nodded. Then yes. "A lot of that. Any chance of reconciliation?" I thought about Sophie's posts, the way she had called this Freedom Week, how she made my emotional state the cause of every problem in her life. I thought about 2 years of feeling like a defendant in my own house, being cross-examined over trash bags and dishwasher loading techniques. "No chance," I said. Evelyn nodded once, like she'd been expecting that answer. "Then here's how we proceed." She slid a packet of papers toward me, explaining the process step by step. Petition for dissolution, financial disclosures, timelines. "If you're serious, bring these back with the retainer fee." In this state, it's no-fault divorce. Unless she contests it, you could be legally done in 90 days. 90 days. 3 months to undo 3 years of slow erosion. I took the papers, thanked her, and left the office feeling light. Lighter than I'd felt in a long time. Driving home, I turned the radio up. Another thing Sophie hated. I caught myself smiling at nothing in particular, just enjoying the sound. At home, I spread the papers on the kitchen table and read through every page carefully. The legal language was dry, but I didn't mind. It was like reading instructions for how to dismantle a machine that had been malfunctioning for years. Sophie posted again that evening. A video this time, a crowded dance floor, music blaring, lights flashing, her laughing into the camera, sweaty and glowing. Caption, "Finally feeling like myself again." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then put it face down and opened my laptop. I opened a new checking account at a different bank, one Sophie had never set foot in. Transferred half our savings, my half, earned with long hours and skipped vacations. Then I spent the next hour going through drawers and folders, pulling out mortgage documents, tax returns, insurance policies, anything that might come up later. I made neat stacks on the dining table. For once, this wasn't about Sophie's idea of organization. This was mine. When I was done, I stood back and looked at the table. It looked like the war room of someone preparing for battle. Except I didn't feel like I was going to war. I felt like I was finally walking toward the exit. Before bed, I did one last thing. Petty? Maybe? Necessary? Absolutely. I poured myself a beer, a cheap one, not the craft stuff she insisted was more sophisticated, and sat on the couch in the dark, just sipping and staring out the window at the quiet street. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel like a stage where I had to hit my marks. It felt like mine. When my wife arrives, I will make it official. Tuesday evening, the front door opened with the sound of a suitcase rolling across the floor. Sophie didn't say hello. She announced herself like she had just come back from a peacekeeping mission. "I'm back," she said loudly, dropping her luggage right in the middle of the hallway where I'd have to step over it. I looked up from the kitchen table where I'd been waiting with the folder of papers neatly stacked. "Welcome home," I said, calm, almost polite. She walked in, scanning the house like a detective searching for clues. "It looks exactly the same," she said, almost disappointed. "Were you expecting me to repaint while you were gone? I just thought maybe you'd use the time to reorganize something, show some initiative." There it was, 5 minutes home and already on the attack. She opened the refrigerator, frowned, and turned back to me. "You bought regular beer instead of the craft ones we usually get?" "I bought what I wanted to drink." Something in my tone made her pause. She closed the fridge slowly and looked at me for the first time since she'd walked in. "Okay," she said cautiously. "We'll talk about that later. First, I want to tell you about my trip. It was exactly what I needed. I feel so much clearer about everything now." She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through photos. Beach sunsets, brunch plates, poolside selfies. Then a picture of her with that guy from the bar, his arm around her. "This is Victor," she said with a little smile. "He's a marketing executive from Chicago. We had the most amazing conversations about life and relationships. He really helped me put things in perspective." "I bet he did," I said. She didn't notice the edge in my voice and kept going. "You know how sometimes you just need an outside view to see your situation clearly? Well, I've been thinking a lot about us, and I know what we need to do to fix things." I nodded slowly. "Go on." "The problem is we've gotten stuck in negative patterns. You come home stressed from work, I react to that stress, then you react to my reaction. It's a cycle. Victor helped me realize that you need to find better ways to manage your stress. Maybe therapy, meditation, leaving work at work so you don't bring that energy into our home." "Our home," I repeated quietly. "Right. And Rachel thinks you might have some control issues," she added carefully. "Like the way you get quiet when I'm making plans." She says that's emotional withholding. I actually laughed at that one, which seemed to confuse her. She sat across from me and reached for my hand. "Listen, Jack. This trip was a reset for me. I feel lighter, happier, and I want us to get back to being happy too. I think if you can work on managing your stress and being more present, we can fix this." I pulled my hand back and rested it on the folder. "You're absolutely right," I said evenly. "You shouldn't have to feel anxious and unhappy in your own home. And I shouldn't have to feel like I'm constantly failing some test I didn't know I was taking." She smiled, relieved. "Good. So we're on the same page." "Not quite." I opened the folder and slid the papers across the table. Her smile faltered as she read the header, "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage." "What is this?" Her voice went up an octave. "It's the solution you asked me to find. You wanted me to think about my mistakes. Well, I did. And my biggest mistake was thinking this marriage was worth saving." "You're joking." "Do I look like I'm joking? You're filing for divorce because I went on a trip with my friends?" I'm filing for divorce because you went on a trip to escape me, then came home and gave me a to-do list for how to be a better husband without considering for 1 second what might make me happy. We can work on this. We can go to counseling. So I can pay a therapist to sit there while you explain how all our problems are my fault? No thanks. She stood up so fast her chair tipped over. This is insane! You're throwing away 3 years of marriage because of one conversation? No, I said, standing up too. I'm ending 3 years of apologizing for existing while you criticized everything I did, said, or thought. That's not what this was. Really? Name one thing you've apologized for in the past year. One thing you admitted you were wrong about. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. That's not fair. You're putting me on the spot. I'm asking a simple question. When was the last time you took responsibility for anything? I just told you I need to be more patient with your growth process. I almost laughed. You taking responsibility is you being patient while I become who you want me to be. That's not responsibility, that's control. Marriage is about compromise, she shouted. No, marriage is about partnership. What we had was me compromising while you complained. She grabbed the papers, shook them at me. You can't just decide this unilaterally. Watch me. For the first time in 3 years, she was completely speechless. I walked toward the stairs. You can stay here tonight if you need to pack some things, I said over my shoulder. But tomorrow, I suggest you find somewhere else to recharge from the stress of being married to me. Jack, her voice cracked. You're serious? As serious as a heart attack. She sank into the chair, staring at the papers like they might disappear if she looked long enough. This isn't how this was supposed to go, she whispered. No, I said, pausing on the stairs. It's exactly how it was supposed to go. You just never considered that I might solve the problem instead of becoming a better problem to live with. Upstairs, I heard her on the phone for hours. She called Maya. She called Rachel. She probably called Victor too. Each call was the same. He just snapped out of nowhere. I think he planned this while I was gone. She wasn't wrong about that last part. By morning, she had moved into full damage control mode. She was sitting at the kitchen table with coffee and a notepad, like she was preparing for a board meeting. I've been thinking all night, she said, sliding the notepad toward me. I understand why you're upset. You felt abandoned when I went on my trip, and you're lashing out. But we can fix this. Here's a list of compromises we could try: date nights, therapy, better communication guidelines. I glanced at the list. Every item was about managing the symptoms of our broken marriage, not fixing the disease. What's number 7? I asked. She hesitated. We could take turns picking weekend activities so you feel included in decisions. Take turns like children sharing toys, I said. Fairness would have been you asking me what I wanted to do sometime in the past 2 years instead of making a list now that you're facing consequences. She slammed the notepad shut. Fine, what do you want? Tell me what would make you change your mind. Nothing. Nothing? Everyone wants something. I want to come home from work without wondering what I did wrong. I want to watch TV without commentary. I want to buy groceries without getting a lecture. I want a wife who asks about my day because she cares, not because she's looking for ammunition. I want to matter in my own marriage. Her face flushed red. I do ask about your day. When was the last time you asked and actually listened without turning it into something about you? Silence. This is impossible, she shouted. You're asking me to be a completely different person. No, I said quietly. I'm telling you I'm done trying to be whoever you need me to be. She stood up, pacing. You can't just give up on us. Marriage is work. I worked for 3 years. You complained for 3 years. That's not the same thing. I wasn't complaining. I was communicating my needs. Your needs were for me to be someone else. My needs were to feel like my wife actually liked me. She froze at that, blinking fast. Of course I like you. Name one thing you like about me that isn't what I do for you. Another long pause. You're reliable. I smiled sadly. Reliable like a washing machine. Thanks. She didn't say anything else. By noon, she had packed a bag and called a rideshare. She stood in the doorway looking at me one last time. You know you're making a mistake, right? You're throwing away someone who cared about making us better? No, I said. I'm walking away from someone who cared about making me different. The door closed with a soft click, and for the first time in years, the silence that followed wasn't tense. It was peace. 3 months later, the papers were signed, stamped, and filed away somewhere in a courthouse folder I'll never see. Sophie kept the car, the one she insisted we buy because it matched her style. Fine by me. I kept the house, stripped of the throw pillows, decorative candles, and passive-aggressive energy that used to fill it. She took half the savings, which stung for exactly 1 day. Then I looked around at the quiet house and realized what I had really bought. Peace of mind. There isn't a dollar amount you can put on that. The first weekend after everything was finalized, I had friends over. Real friends. The ones I hadn't seen in years because we're too tired for guests. We grilled in the backyard, played music too loud, drank cheap beer, and no one judged me for how I cut the burgers or arranged the plates. Through mutual friends, I heard Sophie is engaged now. To Victor, of course. The guy from the beach bar, the positive energy. I raised my glass when I heard the news and said, "Good luck, buddy," and meant it. He can have the performance reviews and the lists. He can be the next project. As for me, I learned something valuable from that so-called Ibiza reset. Sometimes the best way to fix a problem isn't to talk it to death or hold endless meetings about communication. Sometimes the best way is to step far enough away to realize the problem was never yours to fix. Sophie was right about one thing. I did think about my mistakes. I thought about how I stopped standing up for myself. I thought about how I let someone turn my home into a place I dreaded coming back to. I thought about how I let myself become the quiet man in the corner, always apologizing for existing. And then I fixed all of that. These days, I come home and the house is quiet, but it's the good kind of quiet. I cook what I want. I leave my shoes by the door or in the middle of the living room if I feel like it. I watch TV shows with terrible plots and no one sighs or rolls their eyes. Last night I sat on the porch with a beer in my hand, the sun going down, the street completely still. For the first time in years, I realized I wasn't waiting for the next argument, the next correction, the next demand. I wasn't waiting for anything. I was finally just living. If you felt this story hit hard, drop a like, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps Steelheart beating.